The room was a plain training hall tucked away in Los Angeles Chinatown back in the early 1970s. It wasn't anything fancy, no bright lights or polished floors like you see in modern gyms today. Just a second-floor space above an old building on College Street, maybe 30 by 40 feet at most. The wooden floor had worn spots from years of footwork and pivots, dark patches where sweat had soaked in over time. Thick mats covered parts of it, the kind that were thin and patched in places, rolled out fresh for each session. Along one long wall ran a row of tall mirrors, slightly fogged at the edges from humidity, reflecting the whole room back at itself. A few folding metal chairs leaned against the opposite wall, ready if someone needed to sit between rounds, but mostly they stayed empty. The windows were high up, letting in slanted afternoon light mixed with dust motes that floated lazily whenever someone moved. About 30 students filled the space that day. They stood or sat in a loose, uneven circle, not military straight lines, just people naturally spacing themselves out. Some wore simple white gi tops and pants, belts tied tight. Others came straight from work or school in regular street clothes, t-shirts, jeans, sneakers with worn soles. A couple had towels draped over their shoulders. Everyone was waiting for the session to officially start. The air carried that familiar sharp tang of sweat from earlier classes, the oily smell of liniment people rubbed on sore joints, and a faint hint of incense drifting up from the street below. Overhead, 2 bare fluorescent tubes buzzed softly, flickering once in a while when the building's old wiring acted up. Conversations hummed low around the circle. Someone asked about a new warm-up drill. Another person laughed quietly about a sore shoulder from the last workout. Feet shuffled on the mats, adjusting stance without thinking. The mood was easy. Familiar people who trained together regularly, comfortable in the routine. Then a newer student spoke up. He was maybe 25, taller than average, with a voice that carried louder than the rest, confident, like he wanted to be noticed. He said Bruce Lee's name out loud, clear enough that it cut through the murmurs. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Eyes shifted toward the center of the room. The question was simple, nothing complicated, just something casual but pointed, asked in a way that made sure everyone in the room heard it. It hung there, waiting for an answer. Bruce Lee didn't answer right away. He stayed exactly where he was. He stood near the middle of the circle, not posing or centering himself dramatically. Arms hung relaxed at his sides, hands open. Feet were apart just enough for balance, shoulder width, knees soft, weight even. He wore a plain black t-shirt and dark pants, nothing flashy. His face stayed completely even, no frown pulling at his mouth, no smile breaking through, no quick flick of his eyes to acknowledge the challenge. Just calm, steady presence. The room had been quietly buzzing before, low talk about the day's exercises, who was feeling tight, what technique felt off. Now it quieted down a level, like someone slowly turned down the volume on a radio. Not total silence yet, but noticeably less noise. The student who had spoken waited, shifting his weight from one foot to the other once, twice. He looked around at the others, perhaps expecting backup or reaction. A few students exchanged quick glances, raised eyebrows, small nods, like they were wondering what would come next. They figured something might happen, a few words in response, maybe a short laugh to brush it off, or even a quick move to demonstrate whatever point was being questioned. Everyone was ready for some kind of reply, but nothing came. Bruce Lee simply remained still, breathing normally, gaze forward in a relaxed way, not staring down the student, not ignoring him either. Just there, the silence stretched out, second by second, and the room felt it. Seconds passed, 10 at first, then 15, stretching longer than anyone expected in a room full of people used to quick exchanges. Bruce Lee kept his gaze forward, steady, relaxed, not pinned directly on the student who had called his name, but not drifting away either. It was the kind of look that takes in the whole space without effort. His breathing stayed even, chest rising and falling at a normal rhythm you could almost hear in the growing quiet. Shoulders stayed down, loose. No tension showed in his jaw or neck. He simply existed there, in the center, without adjusting his posture to meet the moment. One person broke the stillness first. A woman standing near the back wall, mid-30s, hair tied back, wearing a faded grey sweatshirt, took half a step forward. It wasn't dramatic. Her sneaker just slid an inch or two closer on the mat. She tilted her head slightly, like she wanted to see his face more clearly, to catch any small sign of what he might do next. Then another student followed, a guy in a plain black t-shirt, arms crossed low on his chest. He edged in from the side, moving slow and natural, the way people do when they're drawn to something without deciding to move. His foot placement shifted, shoulders turned a fraction toward the center. No one said a word about it. No one pointed or whispered, "Look." They just moved. The quiet deepened further. What had been a soft background of murmurs now felt almost gone. No one spoke to fill the empty space. The student who had called out Bruce's name cleared his throat once, a small, awkward sound that landed louder than it should have in the hush. He glanced left, then right, maybe hoping someone else would jump in or crack a joke to break the tension. No one did. His arms stayed loose at his sides now, fingers flexing once like he wasn't sure what to do with his hands. More people began to shift. A couple who had been leaning against the far wall, two younger guys in track pants, pushed off gently and walked forward. Slow steps, careful not to make noise. Chairs scraped lightly against the floor as someone in the back row stood up without thinking, wanting a clearer line of sight. The loose circle that had started the session wasn't loose anymore. It started to close in, not rushed, not forced, just gradually smaller. Shoulders brushed against shoulders. Someone's elbow touched another person's arm for a second before they both adjusted. Feet slid and reset on the mats, finding new balance in the shrinking space. Bruce Lee still hadn't moved. Not a twitch, not a word. His hands stayed open at his sides. His eyes remained calm, taking it all in without reacting. The silence wasn't empty. It carried weight now. Everyone could feel the shift happening around them, the way attention was pulling inward, centering on the one person who hadn't tried to claim it. The room held its breath a little longer, easy to follow, building the quiet tension naturally. By now the shift had become unmistakable. Almost everyone in the room had come closer. What started as 30 people scattered in a loose, casual circle had quietly turned into something denser, more focused. The edges of the group had pulled inward like gravity, had taken hold slowly at first, then steadily. No one announced it. No one said, "Let's get closer." They just moved. Steps were small, deliberate. Breathing stayed soft. The space between bodies shrank until shoulders nearly touched, until you could feel the warmth from the person next to you. Eyes stayed locked on Bruce Lee, not staring in a hard way, more like quiet attention that didn't want to miss anything. Some people had their arms folded loosely across their chests. Others let their hands hang open at their sides, mirroring his relaxed posture without realizing it. A few heads tilted slightly, trying to read his face, his breathing, the way his feet stayed planted. The original student, the one who had called out his name now, looked smaller in the middle of it all. His shoulders had hunched a fraction, his arms crossed tighter over his chest, face reddening just a touch around the cheeks and neck, like the silence was pressing in on him personally. He shifted his weight again, but this time the movement felt smaller, less sure. Bruce Lee still hadn't performed. He hadn't filled the space with words to explain himself. He hadn't rushed forward with a demonstration, a joke, or even a single sentence to take control of the moment. Nothing flashy, nothing to prove. He simply stayed exactly as he was, calm, still, present while the room rearranged itself around him. That was why the group leaned in. Not because he stepped forward, not because he demanded attention. The opposite. He didn't chase the spotlight, so the spotlight found him. The silence he held wasn't empty or awkward anymore. It had weight. It drew people in the way a still pond pulls your eyes to its surface. They wanted to understand what was happening, why he wasn't reacting the way most people would. And the only way to get closer to that understanding was to physically close the distance. The room felt smaller now, warmer. The overhead lights seemed lower somehow, the buzz of the fluorescents fading into the background. Breathing became the main sound, a steady collective rhythm you could almost count. In, out, in, out. No one coughed, no one fidgeted loudly. A long minute passed, maybe two. Time stretched in that quiet way it does when everyone is focused on the same thing. Then, finally, Bruce Lee moved. Just a small turn of his head, slow, deliberate toward the student who had spoken first. No big gesture, no dramatic pause. His eyes met the other man's for a brief second, calm and direct. His voice came low, almost soft, carrying easily because the room was so still. "Show me." That was all. 2 words. No explanation, no follow-up. Just those 2 words hanging in the air, simple and clear. The moment didn't explode into anything loud or showy. It just settled. Quiet aftermath and subtle changes in the room. The student hesitated. His eyes flicked down for half a second, then back up to meet Bruce Lee's steady gaze. He gave one small nod, barely more than a dip of the chin, then stepped back half a pace, creating just a little space between them again. Not a retreat exactly, but a quiet acknowledgement that the moment had shifted. No argument followed. No quick comeback. The challenge that had started everything simply dissolved into the air without needing more words. The moment passed without spectacle. There was no sudden applause, no burst of laughter, no one jumping in to comment or explain what had just happened. People simply exhaled, long, slow breaths you could almost hear rippling through the group. A few faint smiles appeared here and there, not wide or showy, just small corners of mouths turning up like someone had understood something without needing it spelled out. Others nodded to themselves, eyes still on the center of the room for a beat longer before they looked away. The tension that had built up in the silence released gently, like a held breath finally let go. The circle loosened again, slowly. Not all at once. Some people stayed right where they were, only a few feet from where Bruce Lee stood. Others took 1 or 2 small steps back, giving the space room to breathe. But it never went back to the original loose, scattered formation. A handful of students, maybe 5 or 6, remained noticeably nearer than they had been at the start. They hadn't planned it. They just hadn't moved away. Their bodies stayed turned slightly toward the middle, feet planted in new spots that felt more connected to the center. The energy in the room had changed. Not loud, not dramatic, just different. The air felt clearer somehow, less cluttered with small talk and side conversations. People who had been standing far back against the mirrors or near the folding chairs were now only a few steps from the mat's edge. Some hadn't even noticed they had drifted forward until the moment had already passed, and they looked around to see where everyone else was. A quiet awareness settled in. No one needed to say it out loud. The room knew something had happened, even if it was hard to put into exact words. No one rushed to speak again right away. The silence wasn't awkward anymore, it felt earned, like the group had gone through something small but real together. A couple of students exchanged glances, quick and knowing, the kind that say, "Did you feel that too?" without making a sound. Someone adjusted their stance, rolling their shoulders once as if shaking off leftover tension. The overhead lights still buzzed faintly, but the sound seemed farther away now. The session hadn't officially restarted yet, but the waiting had a different quality. People stood a little straighter, listened a little closer, even though nothing new had been said. The center of the room still held attention, quietly, without effort. A few minutes later, the session picked up again, as if nothing unusual had happened. The instructor, someone who had been watching quietly from the side the whole time, clapped his hands once, light and steady, and called everyone to line up for warm-ups. Feet shuffled back into rough rows on the mats. Arms swung in slow circles. Breathing synced up again with the familiar rhythm of joint rotations and light footwork drills. The room returned to its normal sounds. Soft thuds of feet, quiet counts under breath, the occasional low instruction from one partner to another. But something had stayed behind from those earlier minutes. The space didn't feel quite the same. Conversations that usually filled the gaps between sets were quieter now, shorter. People spoke in lower voices, glancing toward the center, even when no one was standing there. Eyes drifted back without hurry, like checking on something familiar that had just reminded them it was still there. The circle from before hadn't fully reformed into its old scattered shape. People naturally kept a tighter grouping, closer to the middle of the room. No one commented on it. It just happened. A couple of students who had moved forward the most stayed nearer than usual during partner work. One of them, the woman in the grey sweatshirt, ended up paired close to where Bruce Lee was demonstrating a basic stance adjustment to someone else. She watched without staring, nodding once when he corrected the other person's hip alignment. Another guy, the one in the black t-shirt, positioned himself so he could see better during the next drill. Feet planted a little wider, like he was settling in for the rest of the class with more focus. No big speeches followed. No one pulled Bruce Lee aside to ask what that silence had meant or why the room had shifted the way it did. There was no need. The moment had done its work without explanation. People carried on, sweat starting again, breaths getting heavier, mats creaking under shifting weight, but the attention in the room felt sharper, more present. When someone missed a count or fumbled a move, the correction came quieter, more direct. Laughter, when it happened, was softer, shared in quick glances rather than loud bursts. Toward the end of the session, as people began rolling up mats and gathering towels, the folding chairs got used for the first time that day. A few sat down to stretch or catch their breath, but even then their bodies stayed angled slightly toward the center space. Bruce Lee moved through the room the way he always did, helping stack equipment, nodding to people as they left. Nothing changed in how he carried himself. Calm, steady, no extra words. He didn't raise his voice that day. He didn't need to. The room had already moved closer. And in the quiet minutes after everyone filed out, the training hall settled back into its usual stillness. Mats rolled, lights still buzzing faintly overhead but carrying the faint echo of what had happened. Not dramatic, not legendary, just real.